Hi, Jersey City. This is Rolando Lavaro, Jersey City Councilman-at-Large. I'm joined again with Wardee Councilman James Solomon, and this is the sixth of six interviews for the Wardee Council seat that will be up for a vote for appointment this Thursday, April 30th. We're welcoming Cynthia Hadjiyannis with us. Say hi, Cynthia.
Oh, hi, Councilman.
Hi, nice to have you with us.
Hi, everybody who
Um,
watches this.
Thanks. I hope you're well and that you've been safe and healthy through this pandemic. Let me just share with the public. We sent a list of candidates. I'm sorry, a list of questions to all of the candidates, about 9 questions. They all received the same questions in advance. This interview will last about 30 minutes. During the course of the interview, there may be a follow-up question or two, just to get clarification on some of the responses. And then if time permits, at the end, there'll be question for myself and Councilman Solomon, possibly that's specific and personal to, or specific to Cynthia and her specific qualifications and background. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Councilman Solomon, who has the first question.
Alrighty, and this is a 3-parter, and I'll go one by one. But thank you for being here, Cynthia, and thank you, Councilman Lavaro. So first question is just tell us why you're interested in the position of Wardee councilperson.
Yeah, so it happened gradually in 2005. Well, I moved to the Heights from downtown in 2005. And I got interested in saving the reservoir in my neighborhood. And I've helped form a nonprofit with a group of people. And we had a lot of trouble getting our council person to listen to us. And I thought it was like this no-brainer, that we would want to keep this beautiful treasure for everybody in Jersey City to enjoy. But it wasn't a no-brainer for the city administration. They thought that, it's like developable land, it's very valuable. So they had like dollar signs in their eyes. And it was like a huge struggle. We had to have rallies, we had to bring people to City Hall. So, and we had to make them listen. It was just a major struggle. So 2013, fast forward to, we have an election. And I just, at that time, it dawned on me, well, if I get some good person in office, if we get a good council person, I'm not going to have to beg and struggle to get that council person to listen to us. They'll naturally want to listen. So I, through a series of things, became Michael Young's campaign manager at that time, thinking, he will listen to us. And we worked really well together. He got into office and, he did listen. And now it's 7 years after, it's 15 years since we first started saving the reservoir, and I want to become that person who's going to listen to everybody, and I want to build upon that and then get results and move things forward. And I have confidence I'll be able to. I've been able to do it as a person who's not even in office, so I want to work with the city or become part of the city's council so that I can help move things forward.
Great, thank you. And then the next question is, please describe what education, training, or experience you have that is relevant and makes you qualified to serve as a council representative. And specifically, do you have any training in public administration, urban planning, or municipal finance?
Okay, so I've been practicing law for more than 20 years. My first job in private practice, I worked for the law firm that represented Union City. So I was installed in Union City Hall. I don't know if that was a reward or a punishment, because they were kind of in this transition. The mayor had gotten in trouble. They were trying to, I guess, oust him or do a recall election. So I got familiar with a lot of municipal issues at that time. One of them, they put me in charge of the recall election, which never ended up happening because he resigned. And I worked on all kinds of issues, like a teenager was shot in the back by a policeman. There was a lot of, people calling for a civilian complaint review board. I wrote almost like a master's thesis on policy on civilian complaint review boards. This was for other municipalities we represented. I defended a voter's rights case against a voting rights case against that was brought by the Department of Justice. So, and then over the years, just as a lawyer, I've learned the law. I apply the law, I work on contracts, I negotiate a lot. And those are the things the city council does. You have to vote on ordinances, you have to do resolutions, which I used to prepare some of them when I worked representing Union City, and you vote on contracts. So I think I can jump in, and I don't think it'll be like a huge struggle for me to get up to speed because I'm used to reading the law, I'm used to looking at contracts. And then in my private practice, I've had kind of a niche where I've done a lot of cases against, sometimes in partnership with the government, sometimes I'm, the government's adversary, sometimes against developers. And I'll fight, I'm fighting for the underdog, which is oftentimes groups of neighbors, small businesses, individuals on a shoestring budget. And I've got like a team of people on the other side. And it's not really like a level playing field, but oftentimes I've gotten very good results for people. So, that tackling those tough problems, that's something I'm used to doing, and I'm going to want to do as if I were appointed or elected as a council person. And then, same thing with managing Michael's campaign. I mean, Michael might have made it look easy, and I think he hadn't yet started wearing a bow tie, but it was hard. I mean, we really struggled. It was like an all out, and they use the word campaign because it is kind of like a battle. So I'm not afraid to do difficult things. And for the three things you mentioned, urban planning, I that's a sort of an assortment of things. I started off, my civic involvement actually started maybe in 2000. I was a longtime board member of the Jersey City Landmarks Conservancy. We also did a lot of historic preservation campaigns and education as an organization. As an attorney, I was also on the Historic Preservation Commission from 2005 to 2010. So I understand that component of planning, urban planning. As an attorney, I do land use. I go in front of the zoning board. I go in front of the planning board. I deal with redevelopment, and I've had some litigation involving those things. And I've represented groups of neighbors, but I've also sometimes represented developers and little guys trying to get their variance or get their site plan approval. So I've seen both sides of that. Municipal finance, I can't say I have specific experience in that, but I had wonderful parents who made sure I got a really good education. I was a science major in college, and my dad, I'm sounding like Donald Trump, but my dad was an engineer who went to MIT, and he made sure I took a lot of science and math in high school and in college. So I think like good quantitative reasoning skills, which is what you should have if you get a good education. You're good with numbers. I feel I'm not going to have a problem looking at the budget. And public administration, I mean, I had to even look up what that is. I wasn't totally sure. I guess it's managing the different departments or parts of the city. I thought that was the executive branch and we're the legislative branch. So I would probably just have to know enough to know what's happening in those departments. I myself would not be the manager. So I to the extent that's relevant, I mean, I would learn about it.
Great, Cynthia, thank you. And then the last on this intro set of questions is, right now, are you planning on running in the November election?
Yes, I am.
Great, thank you. Councilman Navarro has the next one.
Cynthia, so as we know, Councilman Yun was known for his analytical questions and his willingness to take on the politically powerful. How specifically will you follow that example, and how would you approach the role differently from Councilman Yun? Okay,
so I mean, I'm not shy about asking hard questions. I know that he was really exemplary. He studied every line of everything he had to vote on, and I would try my best to do that too. And I won't be shy to ask hard questions. I do think Michael, I don't know that he saw himself as taking on the powerful. I think he thought he was taking like a principled stance on issues, and to the extent we worked together already on taking on the politically powerful. Like there's a picture circulating on the internet now, Michael and I standing on the steps of City Hall back in 2005 when we had like a massive rally, and we had 200 or 300 people descend on City Hall to try to save the reservoir. We worked together on his campaign, so and his opponent at the time was more of a career politician and a political, kind of a product of the Hudson County political machine. So, I helped Michael set the example, so I don't think it's going to be hard for me to follow his example. And what's the difference between him and I would make, and I don't know exactly what he did on a day-to-day basis after he became council person, but I think I would make a really serious effort to communicate long before something comes up for a vote. So I would want to talk to the administration. I would hope that they would include me in formulating things that end up being voted upon. I'd want to talk to my fellow council members, and I'd want to talk to my constituents, and I'd want to start all that communication early so that nothing seems like this big surprise at the time I'm voting on it. I also think, Michael was something of a perfectionist, and Obama said, he used to say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And sometimes that perfectionism could shade into obstructionism. And I'm good or bad. I don't have that need for perfectionism that Michael had.
Great, thank you. I use that phrase a lot, so I appreciate you
Yeah.
bringing it up because I need to remind myself. So next question is in your view, what are the most difficult challenges facing the Heights?
Yeah, so I don't think it's any secret. There's a lot of high-rise, high-density development that's moving north from Journal Square and along Kennedy Boulevard, and then kind of along the base of the cliff, most recently from Hoboken. And especially in the COVID era, high density is not really as desirable. Maybe it seems kind of not very safe. And the various groups, whichever neighborhood it is, and it's been all over, groups of neighbors have come out and strongly opposed high-rise, high-density development. And it seems like they go in front of the boards, they try to register their objections, and that seems, I think the boards are polite, but it seems like their objections fall on deaf ears. So I'd like to work on that, whether it's working with city planning or working more with the community or just working more directly with people who have projects that they'd like to do. I think housing's a big problem. I guess it's number two. Rents have been going up. New construction is $700,000 or $800,000 for a condo in the Heights. And people who've lived here their entire lives, they can't find an apartment. People who work hard can't afford to buy a place, like young couples. And even though there are more units, it seems they're becoming less affordable. Senior housing, there are these long wait lists. So I think that's a big challenge. And then there are just these quality of life issues, the livability of our neighborhoods. People have mentioned, it's sort of a constant topic at the neighborhood association meetings, like abandoned properties, trash, caring for street trees or planting street trees. One of the things that really bothers me the most, maybe it's just aesthetic, but the power lines, it's like we always have this messy jumble of cords, and I guess it's like Comcast or phone lines, and Hoboken doesn't look like that. Union City doesn't look like that. And I feel like the phone and the cable companies are disrespecting us. I'd like to get them to do things better. And then of course I was actually Michael's appointee to the Open Space Trust Advisory Committee, and that's an issue for me, open space.
Great, thank you.
Cynthia, as a follow-up to that, what do you see as your 3 legislative priorities if you were to be appointed on Thursday?
Yeah, so it's sort of what I just talked about. I guess it's zoning, and this is going to be a short answer: zoning, housing, and then the third thing would be COVID regulation, which I don't know that any legislation's been proposed yet. I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like, but I'm hoping the council's going to be working on that.
Can I follow up on that, Cynthia? So for zoning, what types of, I guess, legislative changes would you be sort of looking for in that area?
Yeah, so I think the R1 zoning is problematic. It allows people to build like almost like these McMansions on 25 by 100 foot lots. I think when I remember when the R1 was rewritten, and it was sort of almost like tailored to the developer lobby at the time, and this was under a prior administration. So I think if we could kind of, people are like, they're ending up having, we like my house, for example, everybody has nice backyards, there's beautiful trees, there's some wildlife back there, there's a feeling of privacy and nature, and little by little, you got a house with like no backyard, and there's a profit motive that sort of creates an incentive, like to sort of maximize square footage on these little lots. And I'd like to maybe reduce the footprint a little bit. Maybe some neighborhoods where there are more predominantly one-family houses, maybe we can, like, I don't know, sort of make the footprint smaller, maybe not incentivize substituting like tearing down a one-family to build a two-family. I personally, this is more of a constituent issue, and I couldn't answer this well without talking more to people who live in the neighborhoods. But I think the first floor garages are kind of ruining the streetscape. They serve to privatize parking. I'd like to see that changed.
Great, thank you. So the next question gets into parking, so it's a good segue, okay. Which is, what actions would you take as a council person to address parking in the Heights?
Okay, so, we already did the zone parking, and I think people are divided on how much that helped. But I want to first keep the parking problem from getting worse. And I think some of the high density development projects I've been talking about, they create more pressure, they add more cars. I think city planning's taken the position, people, millennials don't use cars. I don't know if that's really true. And the parking and traffic, that's one of the reasons people come out and oppose these projects so vigorously. And each individual project, it's easy to say, well, it's only this many cars for this project, it's only this many. So it doesn't seem like much to the board, but the cumulative effect is bad. It's making the neighborhoods unlivable. So let's keep the problem from getting worse. And then how do we deal with the existing problem? We have a certain number of cars, we have a certain number of spots, and as long as the number of cars exceeds the number of spots, we're going to have a problem. So we either need fewer cars or more spots. And, for people to not want a car, you have to have a really good system of public transportation. And when people, by the time the 119 bus gets to Central Avenue during commuter hour, it's full at Journal Square. So it's like standing room only by the time it gets to Central Ave. So I don't know how we, that's sort of a whole can of worms. Can we improve public transportation so that people are less reliant on their cars? That might be kind of like a pipe dream. So I do think we're going to need to create more spaces. I don't think, and how many more spaces once the city finishes its survey, maybe we'll have a better sense of that. And I'm not really in favor. I think people, Michael was always floating these plans like, oh, well, if we let someone build a tower, we can, on top of a parking lot, we can get like 50 more spaces. And I never thought that was worth it. And I don't know why, it becomes impossible for like cities to do these or Jersey City in particular to do like a capital improvement project without doing like a deal with a developer. But I think there should be a way to create more parking without it being, giving so much up. So I think I don't have a great plan, but I,
No, those are good thoughts. And just a very quick follow-up, which is, are you in favor of the proposal to build a parking garage on Central Avenue?
Well, I have to say, I went to the Charettes and I was pleasantly surprised. I thought, and they had hired one in the city, a young woman in city planning who does visualizations, and that were like 3D. They were, they were excellent. I mean, I was so impressed. So it did, it's funny because I was gonna go and say, like, oh, this is terrible. I don't like this, but I thought it looked really good. I mean, I had one of the 3 renderings she did, I thought seemed better, but yeah, I guess it depends on how it's done. If it's done well, I'm not necessarily opposed to it.
Great, thank you.
Great, Cynthia, you talked about the development and how important that issue was too. Can you tell us what's your position on inclusionary zoning, and also let us know if there are any changes you think that should be made to our rent control legislation?
Yeah, so I'm definitely in favor of inclusionary zoning. I wish it had been done 20 years ago before we had all these units that were approved. Seems kind of like a missed opportunity. And not that long ago, I guess this Bergen Arch Plaza was approved at 414 Hoboken. It's 524 units, 2 towers of 524 units with 0 affordable housing. And the KRE project, I actually kind of got a group of people to get together and oppose the tax abatement for that. And that's a lot of units with no affordable housing and no green space. It's atrocious. But anyway, I guess there are 2 versions of the ordinance that were introduced. One was from the Fulop administration. One was from you, Councilman Navarro. And so I'm not going to say which is which, but one has loopholes in it, and the other one doesn't have loopholes in it. I'm kind of more in favor of fewer loopholes. And I guess the loopholes I'm particularly against are that you can put the affordable units elsewhere and not include them in your project, because you want affordable housing throughout the entire city. I'm also not in favor of the payment in lieu of affordable housing, unless that payment directly funded affordable housing. I'm not totally sure like how that would work, or how they would decide how much of a payment's appropriate. But I don't like the payment that you can just buy your way out of what should be a blanket requirement that everybody just starts to observe. I do think, though, the one loophole I'm not against is community benefit. I think if there is some significant community benefit, I'm not totally against that becoming a reason maybe to change the affordable housing requirement. And and then any requirement has to kind of, I get there must be numbers somewhere. I don't know if anybody's like studied what are our projections for how much affordable housing we need. So I think we got to do it carefully. I mean, there have to be clear parameters. Like I know in New York, I think they had this thing where they had a separate door for the people who had affordable units from the people who had the regular units. I don't want anything like that to happen. That's a disaster. I don't want to be treating people like second-class citizens. For the rent control legislation, the ordinance is old. It's been amended like in a kind of a messy way over time. That's just not really consistent. I think it's very confusing. It needs to be totally overhauled. I'm not sure it was such a great ordinance to begin with. And even I had like some experience with this in my practice where, a landlord had done, a tenant filed a grievance for an illegal rent increase. He didn't have an attorney at the time. Months and months went by. They weren't really, and something that should be decided like relatively quickly. It wasn't getting decided. Months were going by. He was waiting for a hearing. He got me involved, and then they kind of changed the staffing in the office, and they weren't even having hearings for months and months, and then suddenly they decided a hearing wasn't necessary. Someone in the office could make the decision, and when you read the ordinance, it really, you don't even know what the procedure is. Do you have to have a hearing? Can somebody in the office make the decision? So it's definitely confusing. I think the old ordinance, it doesn't allow for like creating new inventory. It only applied to housing that was there, like buildings with 5 or more units that were before 1987. So over time, people who lived in the units, like they passed away, they they got condoed, people got bought out, so the inventory is dwindling. I think we need an ordinance that allows us to increase the inventory of rent-controlled units.
Great, thanks, Cynthia. I'll move to the next question, and just, we're a little short on time.
Okay.
We'll give you a heads up. We have three questions left, but they're
Okay.
multiple parters. So next question is, what is your position on the upcoming school board referendum related to governance? And in the school board's position, how would you address the current school budget crisis?
So I think everybody has the same goal. They want good people on the board. They want the system to change. And I'm not sure it's going to matter whether we have elected school board members or appointed members. It just seems like the process will be politicized either way. But I don't think the voters in Jersey City are going to go for it. The last time a municipality in the state moved toward an appointed board was 16 years ago. I read something in the press that the Jersey City's voters rejected something like this back in 2008. So I doubt people who vote are going to vote to have their right to vote taken away. I just don't see that happening. And I just hope whichever process we have, I hope it does work to get better people on the board and have it be less politicized. And if I were on the board, I mean, that is a massive question, and I think 30 years have gone by and nobody's figured it out. I don't think there's an easy answer. But I think I'd probably try to have an external consultant who specializes in school budgets and school finance and come in and make some tough recommendations. And I might ask internally for people like heads of departments to come up with their own recommendations, but a $98 million budget increase, I just don't think, I think it's going to put a real strain on regular taxpayers in Jersey City. At the same time, our state constitution, it requires that the legislature provide for a thorough and efficient public school system. So not funding the school system, it's not really an option. Like we have to do it. And even the payroll tracks, that seemed like this great alternative, but now it's like businesses are going to be struggling, and it seems like it's going to put a strain on the local economy too. So our options aren't great. I mean, I think it has to be a combination of maybe raising taxes, payroll tax, and then really a really careful look at the school budget by somebody who doesn't have vested interest.
Thank you. Rolando, you get the next one.
Oh, I'm sorry. The next two questions have to do with the COVID-19 crisis. Can you tell us what the city can do to help residents and small businesses survive and recover from the economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, so I don't think we can have economic health without health, because if you're sick, if you're a caretaker, if you have a hospitalized relative, which I have that right now, or if you're just afraid of getting sick, you can't really be productive. It's very hard. So I think we got to really look at what is our public health infrastructure, and the whole pandemic has revealed that the United States doesn't have much of one. So I would love, if I were on the council, I'd love to have maybe a briefing from the people who are responsible for the city's COVID response. Do we have adequate testing? Do we have contact tracing? Has an epidemiologist looked at the numbers so that we can time our reopening, or tie it to our numbers? Residents, I think they're going to need support accessing benefits, support getting their unemployment claims processed, support, like if you're a tenant, support with working with your landlord, or if your landlord's trying to evict you, support in going to court. If you're a homeowner, support, you might need support talking to your lender. I know a lot of lenders are trying to tell people they have to do a balloon payment, which, you know, after you've been unemployed for 4 months, I don't think that's going to work. I think we need to help vulnerable populations so that they can shelter in place even when the city's starting to open back up. So food delivery, grocery delivery, technology. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who don't really have internet access. They don't have laptops, and then that goes for, you know, I think goes for some students, it goes for elderly people, you know, and it goes for certain people who just might have had it at work, but they don't have it at home. So I think there could be some support for that. Businesses, and I'd like to hear from some businesses. I helped some of my clients negotiate with their landlords, and actually the landlords were wonderful. They weren't, you know, I think they correctly understand in this economic climate, they're not going to get somebody better to take a retail space, you know, like quickly. So they've been like very open to negotiation, but I think some businesses might need assistance moving online or changing their business model. And then I think accessing, I don't know how much money there's going to be, but accessing the payroll protection program, I think a lot of business owners could have used help with that, and you know, and they didn't get it. So hopefully the city can provide some of that assistance, and maybe the fund can be used for some of these systemic things, not to just like give direct financial assistance to people, but help them access that assistance so that there's a multiplier effect.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. So last question, and we'll ask you to try to keep it, I know, just to like a minute because we're running long on time. But as you think about the city's budget during COVID-19, what are the areas that you would prioritize, and where areas you would look to cut?
So, okay, I mean, this is such a difficult question. And, you know, I've never run a Department of Public Works. I've never run a police department. So I feel it would be very egotistical for me to say, I'm going to tell you how many police you need, or I'm going to tell you, you know, how many workers you need in sanitation or whatever. So I think I would probably just ask my approach would be, and I'm not sure how much the city's looking to cut. They probably have enough. I mean, I don't know if they can cut the whole 60 million. They'll probably be in debt. But I would take the approach of telling every director, come up with a way to cut 10% or whatever it is, and report back to me. And I might look at historically which departments have seen the biggest increases over the last 5 years, and I might say, okay, you should have a proportionately bigger cut because you've had bigger increases over the past 5 years. But I know you're going to have the hearings come up, and then you'll be learning more about how each department is going to deal with the shortfall. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You might be in those hearings too, so we'll see.
I don't know.
So we just have time for your closing statement, and if you want to share anything with the Jersey City residents, now's your time as well. Anything else?
I mean, I guess I didn't really I prepared for all the questions, but not really a closing statement. But I'm a person who's, you know, has a history, both just as a you know, regular person active in the community and as an attorney, of doing community-based work. And I don't shy away from difficult problems or challenges. And I would bring those skills to the table, and I would do my best to, you know, help people during this pandemic, and help people solve some of the problems we've had that have just been chronic problems, like housing, you know, and rent control, and quality of life. So I think I'd bring some of those skills to the table, and I would, you know, hope that the council considers appointing me. I would really, you know, rise to the challenge if I have that chance.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cynthia, for taking the time. Thank you for putting yourself out there. And obviously stay safe and best wishes to your family and everyone dealing with this epidemic.
Yeah, thank you for setting this up. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Okay, thank you, Councilman.
All right. Be well.
Bye-bye.